Well, as the music says, the big bad builders, the time is indeed running out. I'm very pleased to say we have in the studio for Cladding Matters, Hamish McLay of Search and Convey, and of course, our man, dare I say, where he is actually in, right at the moment, in the House of Lords, where the lawmakers are, the building safety scheme.org, the man in the midst of it all in our Royal Artillery Quays. We're here not just talking about cladding, but also ethics, because today's topic is the builders just don't see ethics as part of the solution. Hamish, take it away, please.
I think before we get there, I ought to tell you about an experience of mine. Had to be over half a century ago now. I was on a stage. I used to do things like that. I was on a stage performing part of the Iolanthe troupe. And if any of you don't know the old Gilbert and Sullivan Iolanthe sort of type thing, I was one of the lords. And as I might say, I'm no taller now than I was then, actually. And unfortunately, the cloaks we were wearing were designed for people, I think, a little bit taller than I was, because I fully recollect this was on opening night, and what we were doing was walking across the stage and singing "Bow, bow, ye lower middle classes," at which point my foot caught the cloak and the cloak fell off my back.
Oh,
but
God.
part of the if you like the bit that I was singing as a tenor was "We are peers of the highest station, paragons of legislation, pillars of the British nation." So paragons of legislation. The House of Lords had a lot more power in those days. Anyway, but this is what we're going to be speaking about, because the ethics of the builders and the developers doesn't seem to be of any importance to them relative to those who are living in places of risk. They're not living in a place of safety. They're living in a place of risk, and they also have a massive, great drubbing in terms of their financial position as a consequence of living there. The ethics of builders, developers who are and the cladding manufacturers who have responded for creating this situation are not willing to actually apply any ethics to it whatsoever. As far as
I'm thinking that it's not so much the cladding manufacturers, because they're not the ones who are actually putting the stuff up and not putting it up properly. They just make the stuff.
I may interject here. There is some cladding which was never fully tested that was actually put into buildings. And from that particular perspective, I do feel that they have some. The main thing is they're not doing anything. So it's only legislation that is going to make the difference. And
on that note, I'm going to go over to our man in the House of Lords himself, Steve Day. So the legislation that you and Lord Lytton, the Earl of Lytton, are fighting for, this will set a new template. Will drub a new drum for moving forward for safer buildings for all. Is that right?
Absolutely. And as the Hamish alluded to, it's very clear that only legislation will make these builders do the right thing. And also, largely, the cladding manufacturers, there's no cladding developer contracts, cladding manufacturer contracts. They've largely got away with it. So what our legislation does, it says no. Cladding manufacturers go into the levy as well as the builders and the developers and the others. So we're actually, the legislation, the only plan on the table that actually attacks them. Because as Hamish said, the Grenfell inquiry proved that the cladding manufacturers actually missold products based on flawed test evidence. So they do need to get whacked, and we need to do it in law. But let me just give you, as we're talking about ethics this afternoon, let me just paint you a picture of why it's a problem. Okay? So firstly, the building safety remediation plan of the government, the last government, was to put some public funding together. They put 8 billion together for buildings from 11 meters and above. And that basically isn't enough. The National Audit Office report said it's 16 billion, so double. There's
Well,
probably
yes,
more
because,
like
they completely underestimated the number of buildings affected by it.
right. So I think we can all agree there's no real sort of like hunger to get more money out the treasury at the moment, given the pensioners and the farm tax and all the rest of it. So clearly it's not going to come from there. It needs to come from somewhere else. And what we're saying is, with that level of conflict of interest, the government either gets the money to do it properly, or what we're seeing is they water down the work that's required. So we don't need to do as much work for that 8 billion, and that 16 billion becomes 8, because now you say, oh, let's leave a load of flammable stuff on the building, which
Yes, well, that's just watering down the effectiveness of the very legislation we're going for here, surely.
And that's got a name, Gareth. It's called PAS 9980. The watered down standard, and the standard itself says you can't use this standard if you're a good builder. You can only use it if you're a rubbish builder and you don't care about eliminating zero risk to life. And that's the problem. And that's because of the government needing to save money. And then in addition to that conflict of interest, you've got the developers who clearly want to maximize profits. Now, who's setting the standard? It's together, those two parties. It's the developers lobbying and the government saying we need to make our money go fast. So you've got a real moral hazard. And this is literally been hours after the Grenfell inquiry report was debated in the House of Lords, which is why I'm here today. And what I've seen is that there's a big, not really a hunger to solve the problem. They think it's largely resolved. Our parliamentarians, are tired of the building safety crisis, I think. And but the problem is the insurers and the market and the lenders are rejecting this partial standard. And there's going to be a day of reckoning where the market, where you just can't buy these properties because no one wants to buy them.
Well, it's also you can't insure. Did I read correctly from some of the notes you've written and sent across to me during the last couple of weeks that insurers now no longer touching B1 rated?
That's correct. Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. So Property Mark wrote to the previous government and they said, and this is their quote, growing numbers of insurers are refusing, not just putting up the price, refusing to insure EWS B1 buildings. And for your listeners, that means they're leaving some of the combustible stuff on. Now, that's a huge problem because you're now going to have to write down huge value to get people to buy it. Because if you've got a 300 grand flat and you're saying, well, you may not get insurance or the insurance is £6,000 a year, you're going to want 200 grand off, aren't you?
At least.
Yeah. So you've got an appalling situation. And the thing is, the market, and this is what's my final point before we hand over back, but my final point is the market, if you have a very unethical government and an unethical policy, ultimately the market, through self-interest, will become your ethical voice. This is what's happening in the insurance and the lending market, and it will get worse in January 2026 when the new banking regulations come in, and it says under Basel 3.1, if you have risky assets which have got liabilities attached, like leaving the flammable stuff on, then higher mortgage costs. There's a day of reckoning coming. What are we going to do if we're not ethical? The government need the old scheme, and I will keep banging on about this until my time to rest comes permanently.
Let's hope that's not in a burning flat.
Absolutely.
Hamish, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and it's going to sound a little impudent, but I'm going to ask it. Does this government not value human life?
That's a secondary consideration. The consideration, and we've been told all sorts of different things. Sadly, it's not. It will say it does. We had some wonderful statements, I think, from Keir Starmer and various other people saying safety is essential. We will be doing this. We'll be doing. In fact, I'm sure they said they were going to be doing something about it by late autumn. So there is some value attached to it, but not as much as really genuinely needs to be sort of brought in. And I think what the Earl of Lytton's his efforts are endeavouring to put some ethical value into legislation, so that legislation is looking after the lives of people. And without that, I mean, this is why I think as many people, if they possibly can, I mean, one of the great things, I mean, Steve is doing magnificent work. He has done magnificent work.
I'm absolute hats off to him, because frankly, I think many of us may have given up by now, frankly, but maybe it's your bull-nosed individuality, Steve, that's forced you through.
I think it's something that runs in the family as well. There is something. We'll speak about that another time, because that is fascinating. That is fascinating. However, getting back to where we were, Steve is actually standing as a candidate for his local council. I can't. Is it South Thames side? I can't remember actually, because I've been speaking about working on different councils.
It's West Thamesmead in the London Borough of Greenwich.
Right. So Steve's standing as a candidate there because at least he can put a voice into the planning committee. And I would advise anybody that can just get your emails going, get those emails clacking. If you need some help finding your local MP, just get in touch with us. You should be able to find it. Just send them a letter through. Pick up some ideas from what we've said. There's plenty of information about the dangers of what's actually sort of going on. It's not just a human life, it's the mental health of people who are living. And it really
there's already been more than one suicide on the back of the pressure that's come from living in a place that's effectively condemned. And I'll never forget the day when Steve told me that the issue is also that the fire brigade, potentially, if a fire was raging there, would refuse to go in the staircase because the way it's been put together is dangerous for them to be there. Ridiculous.
I think this is why it's important, as Steve alluded to as well. We need to get the legislation right to cover it. Aren't going to do it. So write to MPs, write to your local council, and if you're in a position to, in fact, it's a good idea. Why don't you get involved and speak with your council, or see when they've got something coming up, when they've got elections coming up? See if you can get actually involved, because I think it's the only way we can actually improve society, to have enough of the right people who are actually joining and working ethically as whatever they've been, whatever party. It doesn't matter what the party is. It's somebody that can actually sort of talk and actually sort of, and you can stand up as an individual.
Right.
Go independent.
Steve, I'm going to ask you a similar question. How many? We've all agreed now that, of course, the government is ethical, so of course it feels that human life is important. But how many lives is it willing to die? I mean, is it one life is too many, or is it 2 lives too many, 5 lives too many? It appears to me, I thought we should be heading at 0, but apparently not.
Well, it comes back to ethics again, and if you've got a finite money pot and you want it to go further, you need to do less work. And basically you've got a very clear situation. You've got £8 billion of public funding, and you've got a £16 billion problem, and that's highly conservative and excludes buildings below 11 meters. So, at the end of the day, if the government cared about lives, they would either make the polluter pay, as we're suggesting, or put it all on the taxpayer and screw us all over. But at least it's not individuals taking on ruinous costs. But we don't think you should socialise the risk of a defective building industry. It should be the building industry that pays, and the cladding manufacturers are appropriate. So the only way out of this, though, is for all of us to say no. We're not going to accept the status quo from this government and previous governments. We're not going to say, yeah, let's exclude 1.7 million people and make them liable for ruinous costs. We're not going to allow a building industry to hide behind the need to build new houses and build a load of crap. We need to make sure that people in government have to listen to us. And I think it's going to have to be outside of government. I think it has to be outside of Parliament. I think we need to grow an organisation around the Earl. We're already looking at people all the time to support us. And we need to grow such a big voice of professionals that really know what they're talking about. And the insurers and the lenders, throw them in. The fire should care a bit more. Let's get them in. And then let's go as a powerful force to Parliament and lobby them like the developers do. Because I'm afraid you need an equal and opposite body, organisation to counter the very successful, and it has to be said it is successful, developer lobby. And I think ethics is something society is ditching. I think as a society we're moving away from an ethical society.
There certainly seems to be a movement. There seems to be a movement in society to move away from regulation and towards the Wild West free for all that will ensue. I need to draw this to a close. Before I do so, I'm going to give the last word to Hamish.
One of the things to me, society, community actually are the best when the local citizens can get involved with and start working on that particular side of it, because they are ethical people. Some of them will obviously be in the same sort of situation that Steve and his thousand other residents are actually in that state in the Royal Artillery Quays. But there are millions of people throughout the UK who are in a similar position. We've been told it's not just what one thinks of the higher level flats. There's so much more that hasn't yet been found. If we can get together and get our voices heard, this is important. Get the people speaking about something of value. Instead of fighting over stuff we have no control over, we can influence what happens. We need to get involved with what happens. We need to be part of it. And I tell you what, you do that, you'll feel an awful lot better for being part of that, to help others. Even if you're not in that situation, you just think how you would feel if you were in that situation yourself.
It's unconscionable. It's a ridiculous position to be in. Frankly, it should never have occurred, but it's what happens when people are trying to scrimp and save on fixings, which should be not an option. That's the problem. The fact that there was an option, that's and this is what happens in a deregulated situation. People can do whatever they like and get away with it, right up to the moment when you can't. Hence, then you get a Grenfell. I want to thank, of course, Hamish McLay for his inestimable support and inspiration, frankly, for this, and of course Steve Dave for his untouchable work that he's beginning, dare I say it, to win through on early stages, I guess. But I think the fact that he's talking in the House of Lords, the fact he's there and witnessing things and being part of it, and good luck. Let's all wish Steve good luck on his quest to become a local councillor for the Lib Dems. Your work will be required and needed. But I say to all of you out there, as Hamish says, engage your local government representative. That's the person you put in place that's supposed to represent you. If you feel strongly, if you want to champion life over money, then you should be talking to your MP. Until next time, I think there's great positive stuff on the horizon. Hamish and I were talking just before we came on about how many magnificent things there are available to all of us out there. Let's make a strong ethical boundary and also a strong moral centre part of that. And until next time, I wish you all very well. I wish Steve the best of success. And Hamish, thank you very much for helping make this happen. Take care, one and all, and watch out, you big bad builders, because time is coming and then time is now. Bye-bye.